What is up, maniacs? My name is Zach, and I am the Milly Maker Maniac. Welcome to our Week 11 player pool video. This is where I take you through the players that I will be mixing into my tournament plays this week, walk you through what I found in my research and why I've made the decisions I've made as far as who is in my player pool. As always, please comment. I appreciate y'all tuning in. If you're interested in getting this spreadsheet or my game by game breakdown spreadsheet, I'm happy to share these with you. This is the spreadsheet that I go through and match up PFF grades from in matchups. So I'll take pass blocking versus pass rush or receiving grade versus coverage grade, giving you an idea of where matchup advantages are based on PFF grades. Gives you a little insight on where to focus your efforts out this week. There's a lot more that goes into it than just those PFF grades, though. So that's where we're going to be walking through this week. But if you want those spreadsheets, including this spreadsheet, just shoot me an email at millymakermaniac@gmail.com, and I will send those over to you at no charge. Just appreciate you for tuning in, and please help share the channel. Trying to grow it to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the season this year. All right, let's go ahead and jump right into it. We'll start talking quarterback. So I have 4 core plays this week that are going to be, I think, somewhat contrarian. We've talked about it in the past, but I don't really care about ownership percentage. When I go through and do my research, I'm just trying to find the plays that I think have the best likelihood of scoring the most points, therefore having the winning lineup in the Milly Maker. But it is nice when I go through all my research and then I start to look at these ownership percentages and see some of the guys that I like, such as Lamar Jackson, are going to be very low owned, because if I am correct, then I have a lot of leverage on the field. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what ownership percentage is. We just need to score the most points. But if some of our key pieces are low owned, that helps us separate from the rest of the field in those outcomes. So Lamar is definitely one of those plays this week. They're playing the Browns. Obviously, the Browns have a good defense. They're playing in Cleveland. But this team put up 41 against the Browns earlier in this year. And Lamar is coming off the injury, but this is his 3rd week back. He has ran the ball a decent amount. When we go look at his game log, had 9 attempts last week, 5 in his first week back. And this will be week 3, but he's putting up solid scores, 25, 16 last week. It's an ugly game, but I don't think what Cleveland does is more basic than what Minnesota does on defense, and I think it's just a better feel for Lamar. But we see down here against Cleveland earlier in the year, he put up a 26 spot, and he pretty much did that in the first half because they were just dominating in that game. I think we're likely to see more of that from them. I think Baltimore has Super Bowl aspirations. Obviously, they are 4-5 right now and got off to a slow start, but I don't think the belief in that locker room has changed about them being Super Bowl contenders, and I think they're going to come out this week and just dominate. And one thing about this matchup is it's a tough matchup for the run game. Cleveland is very good against the run, and where they're susceptible is in the passing game. And I think as long as Lamar can get time and doesn't turn the ball over, which is a possibility, I'll definitely be playing some Browns defense. If I'm building somewhere in the ballpark of 10 to 15 Lamar lineups, those lineups, if they hit, I'm going to have a lot of success. But outside of that, it's not really going to impact my other lineups. There is a couple pump plays that we'll talk about later that I like out of this game. But for the most part, it's Lamar hitting or Lamar not hitting, and then I'm not really touching this game outside of that. But I do think that there's a good chance that Lamar is, when he's like 3%-ish owned, like he's very capable of putting up 30-plus points any week. It doesn't matter the opponent. And with nobody playing him in tournaments, that's the type of scenario that I want to be involved in. So Lamar is a sneaky core play this week. I'll be building around 15 lineups with him. It is hard to stack him. When we go and look at Baltimore stacking partners, pull them over here. There are a few sneaky ones that I like. So we got Henry. There are weeks that I was stacking with Henry. This isn't that week. Flowers is interesting. I really like Hopkins because Bateman is out and he's 3,400. In the previous few weeks, the only other receiver besides Bateman and Flowers to even run routes has been DeAndre Hopkins. And early in the year when Lamar was playing, he seemed to have a connection with Lamar. Obviously, just 2 targets here, but got in the end zone both weeks. But I think we could see him in the range of somewhere of 6 to 7 targets this week. And if he gets that, he probably scores. And then he's paying off big time as a punt play. So I really like Hopkins. I'm going to end up somewhere around 25% Hopkins, which is pretty heavy for a guy at 3,400, but it just feels like a great spot for him this week and opens up a lot of stuff in our lineups. And then a tight end, both Andrews and Likely, I will mix into my lineups with Lamar. Outside of my lineups with Lamar, I probably won't be playing them. All right, let's move on to our next quarterback. That's Brock Purdy. So this game is my favorite game of the week. This is the 49ers and the Cardinals. Just both teams have defenses that you can't count on, and primarily based on injuries. Like both defenses have been okay throughout the year, but both defenses are very banged up right now. And then on Purdy's side, he's getting basically all of his weapons back. The O-line's been playing better, but now he's got Pearsall, he's got Jennings, he's got Kittle, he's got McCaffrey. Like that group has only played, I think it was 11 snaps together all season long. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. Also expecting their defense to give up a ton of points to basically any team because they are so banged up. They have so many guys on IR. It's basically a JV defense. Like they're playing a lot of practice squad guys. And Jacoby Brissett has been solid, so he's definitely in our core plays as well. But Purdy, I love a lot. It is a little bit harder to stack him. It can be a little bit harder to stack him because he doesn't have one go-to guy. Now that everybody's healthy, there's 4 different guys that you can mix in with Pearsall, Jennings, Kittle, and McCaffrey. My thought on McCaffrey this week, we'll get to it when we get to running backs, but with all these weapons being back, McCaffrey at 9K, you really need a 40 spot from him to pay off, and he definitely could hit that. That's in the range of outcomes, but he's only hit that number once this year, and he was close a couple weeks ago. But I think that they're probably going to take a little off of his plate because we have all these weapons back. So I think attaching the cheaper guys like Pearsall, Jennings, and Kittle are the better plans, is the better plan with Purdy, just because it's easier for them to pay off their price. I think that McCaffrey won't pay off his price this week. He could score like 20, 25, and that's not paying off his price at 9K, just because I think they're going to spread the ball out a little bit. And I also think that they're probably going to run the ball a little bit more with Brian Robinson. That looked really good last week. And so I think they're going to try to take some of the touches off McCaffrey with everybody being there, plus Robinson just looking better last week in the run game. So really like Purdy. While we're here, if we can just jump over and look at Brissett. He's another one of my favorite plays. At 4,900, he opens up a lot. Now, obviously, the stacking partner is McBride. McBride is by far tight end 1 this week. There's just nobody on San Francisco that can stop them. Like, they have no linebackers that are a threat. They have no safeties that are a threat to stop him. Like, they can double team him, put him in triple coverage. I don't think they're going to be able to stop him. I think he's going to have around 10 catches, 100 yards, and probably a couple touchdowns. Like, 6,300 is a crazy value. So I want McBride, a lot of McBride. But now that Harrison's out, there aren't many other options, right? Like, he can't just go to McBride on every play. So we'd expect Wilson to be somebody else that we can attach to him. Dortch, I'm not as interested in. I don't think he really has much upside, but really it only takes, if he somehow gets 5 catches for 50 yards, it pretty much pays off his price at 3,300 there. Wilson, I think, has more touchdown upside. I think he'll be running more of the routes. Like, we've seen him just be getting more targets throughout the year. Hasn't really done much with them, but in this situation, with so much focus going to be on McBride, there could be some opportunities for Wilson. And then Demercado we'll get to in the running backs, but I think you can mix him in as well. So Wilson and McBride are the main stacking partners, with Demercado also included in that. All right. Last quarterback to hit on is Joe Flacco. So in this last time they had this matchup, Flacco, this was his first game with Cincinnati. It was a Thursday night game. Put up a 29 spot. it just Pittsburgh, it's in Pittsburgh this time, so that definitely makes a difference. But I just don't see how they're not going to continue to throw the ball. Like the way that this doesn't work is if Pittsburgh's defense creates some turnovers, but even in that situation, like I could see that happening. Like I'm not okay with even playing Steelers defense against Flacco because I could see them getting a sack fumble, scoop and score, or pick six, or things along those lines. But that just means that Cincinnati is going to go air raid with it, and they could get a lot of points in garbage time. But with Flacco, it's super easy to stack. Primarily, it's Chase and Higgins. I'm pretty much only playing Chase with Flacco because when Chase puts up a 40 spot, he's bringing Flacco along with him. If he doesn't put up a 40 spot, then 20, 21, 25, those are scores that don't really do us any good at 8,500. In order to win a Milly Maker, there's much better things we could do with our salary if he's not hitting that 40 spot. I think he's much more likely to hit a 40 spot than McCaffrey, so he'll be more of my core play than McCaffrey will. But when I play him, I'll be playing him with Flacco because if he hits, it's basically taking up 2 squares for me. I know that Flacco is going to come along with him as well. I like mixing in T. Higgins outside of just the Flacco stacks, but definitely can be in the Flacco stacks and should be in the Flacco stacks. And we can also mix in some Chase Brown too. Chase Brown getting a receiving touchdown or two is definitely a possibility. We had that happen in week 8 where the stack with against the Jets, the primary stack that would have worked with Flacco was Flacco, Brown, and Higgins. We go over here and look at Higgins in that one. That was the stack. Oh, I guess not. I thought the Jets. I guess I misremembered on that. I thought that was when he split the 40 spot. But we've seen weeks where it's running back plus one of the receivers. What did Chase do that week? Yeah, the Jets week was Chase was the best option. So actually the best stacking partner that week was just Chase Brown. But I can go Chase Brown plus Higgins, Chase Brown plus Jamar Chase. We can definitely mix that in, but primarily Flacco plus Chase and then Flacco double stacked with Higgins as well is really nice. So those are my core plays at quarterback. Probably have around 15 to 20 lineups with all of those guys. Then solid plays that'll be mixing in. Josh Allen, everything is telling me not to play him. Everything I was finding in my research said not to play him, but he's Josh Allen. They're coming off a loss. They're at home. Hard part about Allen is it's hard to figure out who to stack him with. They tend to spread the ball around, and he also obviously can get a lot of rushing touchdowns. So I'm just playing Josh Allen naked this week rather than trying to figure it out. I think there's just better options at receiver, and with Kincaid out, like I don't really want to play Knox. I don't want to play Knox with Josh Allen there. So Allen naked, and then they play the Bucks. So Allen with the comeback of Rachaad White or Emeka Egbuka or Kate Otten, something like that. I like that game stack. But really, it's just Allen has to go hero mode for this. I think they're going to try to salvage a run, but Tampa Bay is pretty good at stopping the run. So I think this game has a pretty good chance of hitting the under, but there's also the scenarios that I'll be playing primarily through the stacks of Allen and Mayfield, where this game is a back and forth affair. When you have 2 playoff caliber teams with 2 Pro Bowl level, all pro level quarterbacks, you have 2 MVP candidates here, a shootout is definitely in play. So we're going to play a few lineups with that occurring. Mahomes, they play the Broncos, but they play the Broncos without Surtain. I like, anytime you're playing Mahomes, obviously Rice is like the obvious stack with Mahomes, but I actually really worthy this week. The middle of the Broncos defense is really solid. Their linebackers and slot corners. So I think that they could actually handle Rice pretty well. Rice obviously has been pretty solid since he's been back and been getting a lot of targets. But the outside of Denver's defense without Surtain is open. I know Worthy really hasn't done anything yet. He's getting the targets, but I think he could have a big play or two this week against the Broncos at 4,900. He gets one big play and he pays off his price. He could easily get to a 25 spot, and he has upside to even have bigger games than that. Kelsey, I don't love at 4,800. I'd rather have Kittle at that price at 5K for Kittle, but I'll mix him into a couple of my Mahomes lineups. We talked about Baker, but Baker's easy to stack. It's with Egbuka. You can mix in Odd and you can mix in Tez Johnson. I actually also like mixing in Rachaad White in those stacks because he is so active out of the backfield in the passing game. But yeah, five or so lineups with Mayfield. He obviously was in the Milly Maker last week. It's a big game for both teams. And in those big games, I like good quarterbacks having the potential to put up a lot of points. Being locked in, needing to move the team up and down the field, and finding ways to make it happen. These are two guys that are capable of that despite the matchup. It's a much better matchup for Baker than it is for Josh Allen. So I kind of like the Baker side of this better, but the hard part is figuring out how the Bills score. Like, I think James Cook is going to struggle. So if the Bills have a game where it really pushes Baker into that like top echelon of fantasy points, because they're having to score a lot of points, I almost think that's the Josh Allen game. So it's hard to game stack this one because I don't know if I'm playing Baker, it almost needs Josh Allen to go off. So I guess that can still occur. Josh Allen could go off, but Baker just outscores him by 2 or 3 points or something like that. And Baker is easier to stack, so he fills more squares. So there's definitely reason to want to play Baker. It's just initially thought about him being like one of my core guys, but the more I look at it, I think that this game has a decent chance of hitting the under. There's scenarios where it's a shootout, but I think the more likely outcome is it hits the under. Then we got Caleb Williams playing JJ McCarthy and the Vikings. It looks like a tough matchup for Williams, but I want to build 5 lineups with him. Easy to stack with Odunze. Moore's coming off an injury. He's going to play, but really, to me, just Williams to Odunze is the stack that I really am interested in. We can mix in maybe a little bit of Loveland, but I don't love it at 3,600, especially with Kmet being back. But Burden is an okay punt play. I would mix him into my Williams lineups. I'll probably have one DJ Moore lineup, probably one Luther Burden lineup, and then primarily just skinny stack with Odunze there. The thought process there is I do think that there's plenty of scenarios with Chicago's defense that the Vikings score a lot of points. I think there's a lot of big play opportunity, which is why I like McCarthy. But in a scenario where the Bears get down early, Williams could lead some comebacks and have to have some high pass volume. I think if that were to occur, the more likely thing is that Williams just fails this week. But I want to play a few lineups as if he doesn't. One of the reasons I think he could fail is their running backs are really bad in pass protection. And we've seen Brian Flores with the Vikings really take advantage of that against other teams. We saw that against the Lions a couple weeks ago. And Caleb under pressure hasn't been great this year. So I think there's a lot of ways that Caleb fails, but there's enough outcomes where he succeeds that I want to build 5-ish lineups with him. McCarthy is sporadic, doesn't have much touch on the ball, but he is enthusiastic, doesn't seem to have any sort of fear of making a mistake, gets right back on the saddle and makes big throws or attempts to make big throws. Needs to find some touch. He just throws these laser beams in there that are very hard to, almost uncatchable. But all that being said, this Bears defense gives up a ton of big plays. McCarthy has 2 really great weapons in Justin Jefferson and Addison, and then obviously Naylor had the big week last week, so he's easy to stack. I think there's upside for both of those receivers. You could definitely see a scenario where McCarthy puts up a tournament-winning score just because of the weapons around him and this matchup. So give me probably around 10 lineups with McCarthy in it. I like Sam Darnold in this matchup. So they play the Rams. It's a big playoff, has big playoff implications, obviously. The Rams are one of the better defenses that they've played. What this all comes down to is, can Seattle's offensive line protect Darnold enough to have success against this secondary? The secondary for the Rams is their biggest weakness on defense. It's not bad by any means, but it is the biggest weakness that they have. And we know, obviously, Darnold has been killing it this year with JSN. I think JSN has potential to have a huge game this week. I like him a lot better than McCaffrey and even more than Chase to have that 40-point game. So he's my go-to pay up option this week. Most of the time, if I had a receiver at 8,900, I wouldn't play him without their quarterback. I will play JSN a little bit without Darnold, but I will obviously, anytime I'm playing Darnold, I would be stacking with JSN. It'll probably just be that skinny stack. I don't really want to try to guess the other pieces on that. We could throw in like a Barner or an Arroyo, but I will have some with Shaheed for sure, just because Shaheed, it could be 2 or 3 plays and he pays off his price. And that is one of the ways that Darnold hits his ceiling is a couple big plays to Shaheed. And the Rams are going to do everything they can to take away JSN. So it's going to open up some nice matchups for Shaheed. So definitely see some outcomes where Darnold hits a ceiling. He'll be pretty low owned too. So somewhere in the 8 lineup range with Darnold. Then we got Rodgers playing the worst defense in the league in the Bengals. The last time they played, Rodgers had a decent game. Over here and look at that. 25 points in the last game, and he really did have one of his worst performances in his career last week. He even stated as much in the post-game presser. I like him to bounce back, and it's a good spot to bounce back. Another hard part with him is who do you stack him with? I'm actually out on Metcalf this week. The one player on the Bengals defense that is solid is DJ Turner. And so what teams have basically done is whoever's being guarded by DJ Turner, they just don't throw it that way because there's 10 other mismatches on the field. So why would we go to the one that is a mismatch or even like a neutral matchup? So I just don't think that they're going to go to Metcalf this week because DJ Turner will be shadowing him. Austin is an okay play. Roman Wilson it's thin, but he did score a touchdown last week. There's some potential there for sure. Definitely a punt play to consider. But I really like the tight ends. The last time they played, Freiermuth had 31 points. The thing is they play 3 tight ends, so it's like, where are these targets going? But everything I was finding in my research was really pointing me back to Freiermuth, and at 3,200, he opens up a lot of salary for this slate. So my favorite stack with Rodgers is Rodgers to Freiermuth. And then I'll build like 1 or 2 lineups with these guys, Jordan Love, Herbert, and Penix. I was going to be a little bit higher on Penix and London, but one of the things I found in my research is just how bad teams have been the week after the international game. Most of the time, those teams end up with buys, but in this case, when teams don't have a bye after the international game, they tend to underperform. And Penix has just been underperforming already this year. They lost 30-0 to the Panthers previously this year. So it just looks like a tough spot. I'll build a couple lineups with him in London, but not a ton. Herbert, he's hard to stack. This offensive line is atrocious. He's been able to overcome it, but it's hard for me to see a ceiling game. I don't think they're really going to be pushed by the Jaguars either. I think this is probably going to be a pretty low-scoring game. I could see like a 24-17 type environment where Herbert throws maybe 2 touchdowns, but there are some ceiling outcomes. It's just hard to stack in. My go-to stacks would be with McConkey, followed by Odunze, and then QJ. Or I said Odunze. Gadsden is who I meant. Aronde Gadsden would be my number 2 stack with Herbert. If you guys are not playing, I'm not playing Knicks. I don't believe in the Broncos. Not playing Trevor Lawrence. Not playing Bryce Young. Not playing Winston. Not playing Davis Mills. Davis Mills is the only one that kind of worries me in that range. Obviously, he had the decent game last week, but I'm a lot more interested in the Titans defense. I think like Mills, if you watch that game, didn't play well and got bailed out with a few good plays by his pass catchers. I might build, the more I talk about it though, like I'm going to have a lot of Tennessee's defense. I could probably build 1 or 2 Mills lineups. So we'll build a couple. Obviously, he was QB1 last week, and this isn't a tough matchup. So we should give him a couple. We'll give him a couple lineups just in case. Let's move on to running back. I'm going to take some obscure stands this week. Hopefully it pays off. But Josh Jacobs playing the Giants. The Giants' run D has been really bad this year. Their defensive line, like everybody talks about, like how good this defensive line is, and they have some good pieces, but they're primarily pass rushers. They are very bad against the run. It's like they just sell out to get sacks, but they forget on first down that you got to stop the run. And I think that what the Packers have wanted to do all year is just run the football. Josh Jacobs seems to be healthier. He's battling that calf injury, but last week was his highest carry share of the season. So it just looks like a smash spot. I can see Jacobs scoring 2 tutties at 7,800. Yeah, he's one of my, I'll have somewhere around 40 to 50% Jacobs. Dowdle hurt us last week. We went 100% Dowdle. He broke our hearts, but we're going to go back to him this week. We're not going to be phased. They play the Falcons. I just mentioned how the Falcons are coming off of that trip, the overseas trip from the international game. And they have been a run funnel defense. And I think that's what the Panthers are going to try to do is just run the football. They got away from it a little bit in the second half of that game last week. What really killed that game is Bryce Young just failed to convert like the 3rd and 4s and the 3rd and 5s. If Bryce Young can convert 3 or 4 of those and keep a few drives going, they're just going to keep pounding the rock with Rico Dowdle. And I can see him with another one of those 30-point games that he's had 3 times this year. Here's my first sneaky one. It's Rachaad White. A lot of people are on Sean Tucker this week because they split the carries last week, but they did not split the snap share. It was roughly 4-1 in Rachaad White's favor in the snap share. And last week's matchup against the Patriots is a tough matchup for the run game. It just didn't, like Rachaad White's not an explosive runner by any means, but he's a capable runner. And we go look at his game log. He's had a 23 against Seattle, which is a really good defense. But a big part of that is because of what he's getting involved in the passing game. He's like getting 5-ish targets almost every game in the passing game. Another reason why I'm okay with stacking him with Baker. But he's been getting, if he gets around 15 carries against this Buffalo defense, their run defense is awful. Like was averaging a 3.8 last week against New England, but their run defense is really solid. To me, this just feels like nobody's on Rachaad White. They're all seeing that Tucker had 10 carries last week, but they're not seeing like the snap share was crazy different. It is possible that Tucker could snipe a goal line carry. Like it's all definitely in play. But I think Rachaad White's probably going to have 15 carries, 5 receptions for 50 yards, somewhere in that ballpark. I think he's going to have a solid day through the air. And I think he'll find a way to score at least 1 touchdown. That 25-plus point game, I think, is likely this week, and nobody's playing it. So I'm going to be going there. I'll probably be somewhere around like 25%-ish on Rachaad White, which will be way above the field. My guess is he'll probably end up around like 5% owns. In that range, you also have Jaylen Warren, who's going to be extremely popular. Juckins is another guy that people will probably be interested in. Vidal and Swift will get some ownership, and then you have Chase Brown down here who's very chalky. So I think that most people are in this range are going to be going Warren and Brown. I think White actually could outscore both of them. I do like Warren. He's the next guy on our list. He is just playing the worst defense in the league, and we would like to play running backs against the Bengals. He scored 22 against the Bengals the first time. I think there's upside from that. 30 is definitely in his range, and I'll be around 30% on Warren. All right, now here are where we're getting a little deeper. A couple of core plays. Woody Marks last week had 80% of the snap share and carries. Put up a 16 spot against Houston. He, I think, has potential to put up, we've seen the last time they actually played Tennessee, put up a 28 spot against them. He's dynamic. He is going to get catches or targets as well as carries. It looks like they're moving on from really leaning on Chubb. So I like the chances of him having a big game here. He's one of my favorite value plays at running back. And then the next play we have, it's a little deeper. And this is going to be very unowned, but Emari Demercado. He is 4,500. Stone minute running back is 4K, so he's very cheap. This was the week, Tennessee was the week that he dropped the touchdown on the big run. He only had 3 carries in that game, but would have had a touchdown there. And then basically was punished and not played the following week. Then he was mixed in a little bit against Dallas, averaged 5.6 yards a carry. Obviously, it's against Dallas, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. But last week against a good defense, he busted a 55-yard run, and they had 3 receptions for 40 yards. They don't have Marvin Harrison this week. Bam Knight looks like he's going to play, so that is a little bit concerning. But my read on that situation, let's pull this up and look at it. So he was limited all week in practice. It looks like it's a high ankle sprain from what I was reading and looking into. But when you look at a guy like Bam Knight, he knows like this is his one shot. So I think he's probably playing pretty hurt because he wants the opportunity. And this is a great matchup against San Francisco too. But I think there's a decent chance that he doesn't make it out of the first quarter, or even if he is like gutting it out, isn't effective, and they're going to have to go to Demercado. And they can't throw the ball to McBride on every single play. Like they're going to have to run the ball a little bit, and I think they're going to be doing it through Demercado. So I'm going to be somewhere around 20% Demercado. If he hits, I will have a massive leverage on the field, but I think he's very capable. He's had some big explosive plays. I think they're going to draw up some screen plays and such for him. They're going to have to find ways to use the attention that's given to McBride to get other players in solid situations. And I think he's just the most dynamic player that they have left. And so I think they're going to try to find ways to get him in good situations. And this San Francisco defense is just bad. It's really bad. So I know it's a little crazy, but that's where I'm going. He's one of my core plays. So primarily, roughly in, we'll say 75%-ish of my lineups, it's just going to consist of 2 or 3 of these guys. I really like going 3 running back build. We've seen that be very successful this year. And Demercado opens up a lot. If Demercado put up a 25 spot and we have him in a lot of our lineups, it just gives us so much flexibility to get to other guys at other positions. If we don't go to him and we build a 3 running back lineup, we're going to have to punt a couple times at wide receiver. And I think I have some pretty good punt plays there, but punt plays at receiver are obviously extremely volatile and can miss. You can get 0 spots and it can ruin a lot of good lineups. So I like what I'm able to do from a roster construction standpoint when I mix in Demercado. Now, we talked about McCaffrey. Obviously, he's a great player, but at 9K, I just think it's unlikely that he pays off that price this week for multiple reasons. The primary one just being I think that the ball gets spread out more this week with all the weapons being back and with Purdy being back. And then I also think that we shouldn't discount what we're seeing from Brian Robinson. I think he is going to be mixed into the offense a little bit more because McCaffrey has not been effective as a runner this year. He's obviously been a real solid fantasy asset, but he's primarily done that through the air. On the ground, he's been a below average runner. The thing he doesn't make, like he makes the play that's supposed to be there. Like he'll go get that 3 yards. He'll hit the gap, but hasn't been as dynamic in the run game as he has been in previous years. And I think that they can take some of the wear and tear off of him with Robinson showing a little bit more explosiveness in the run game. So for all those reasons, I'm out on McCaffrey for the most part this week. I'm not going to not mention him in my player pool video, but I really am going to be almost completely out on McCaffrey just because I think on this slate, the better pay-ups are actually going to be at receiver, at JSN and Chase compared to McCaffrey. I want Jacobs to really be the high end of my pay-up. Bijan, this is a sneaky spot. I was going to be more interested in him, but when I was doing more research and just found out more about teams struggling off of that international game, it just makes sense to me. And Bijan has really been splitting a lot of reps with Algier, and Algier's been getting a lot of the goal line work as well. I think that upside to pay off this price, it's pretty unlikely that he hits that upside. Like him getting 20, 25, definitely very likely. Could see that, but 25 doesn't really work for me at 8,300 because most weeks there's 5 to 6 guys that get scored 25 points at running back, and if 3 of those guys are cheaper than him, then he was a bad play. And I just think that's probably how the slate plays out. I think that there's 3, hopefully 4 guys out of this group that score 25 plus points. And if that's the case, these were the correct guys. Bijan and McCaffrey were not. So that's the philosophy I'm going into this week, where I'm pretty much going to be fading these guys. Obviously, I have to mention them because they are 2 dynamic players. Bijan is one of the most talented guys in the whole entire league, but they just don't have all the pieces around him. Plus the dynamic of coming back from the international game. I think it's a fade this week for these 2 guys. Cook, initially on the week, I was pretty interested in. Tampa Bay did give up 2 big runs to TreVeyon Henderson last week, and that's definitely possible with Cook. And the Bills do seem determined to run the ball. So I think he should get volume. But Tampa Bay, for the most part, has shut down the run. It's where they have given up fantasy points has been just on big plays, which he's definitely capable of. So we want to mix him in. I'll probably be somewhere around 10%-ish on Cook. He was the closest of this group. Actually, Brown would probably be the closest. But these 2 guys, I want to mix in a little bit more than the rest of the group, just because I think that they do have ceiling potential this week. I just really like where I came down to was like, in this price range, I feel a lot better about Josh Jacobs and Rico Dowdle. I can make a case for Cook, but I think these guys, it's just more likely here. So I'll mix him in, but I didn't want to take a big stand on him this week because I just don't believe he's the better play in that range. Swift is intriguing, but I think he's probably just a better play in like redraft. Like he'll be a solid like RB2-ish this week. Upside is hard to find. I think him being 25 plus, I think is pretty unlikely this week. So I'm not going to play much Swift, but he is somebody that I wanted to mention because I do think that they're going to try to rely on the run game quite a bit this week against the Vikings. I don't think they want it to be a Caleb Williams game. Chase Brown, with P. Ryan out, he's getting like the vast majority of the work and has been much better in recent weeks. 19, 25, 15. So he's going to be very chalky, which is fine. I'm not worried about playing a chalky running back. But I just think Warren has a higher upside in that same range. And I think Marks is going to has similar upside to him. I really think it's like the most likely outcome in this game is it's probably the Jamar Chase game is what my gut tells me. That being said, there's probably going to be a lot of points in this game. He can catch. There's been a few times where where Chase and Higgins are running clear out routes and they run that little drag with him out of the backfield and he's just wide ass open. Like he can bust a big one out of the backfield like that. I'm not going to fade him completely, but I'm going to be below the field on Brown. ETN is solid. I don't know how much touchdown equity there is. Because I think the Jags are going to struggle to move the football. So he's okay, but not my favorite. Just in this price range. If these guys hit, if this range hits, it opens up a lot for builds. But I think what's likely in this range is you get a few guys that are like put up 20 spots, which is usable at this price point for sure. But I don't think that there's big ceiling there. Like I definitely think there's more ceiling with Warren and with Marks and even with Demercado than this range right here. Kareem Hunt is a sneaky one to me. I'll definitely play about 5% Hunt, which should be above the field. But with Pacheco out, like that coaching staff loves Hunt. Everybody's talking about they need to get Brashard Smith more involved. That's not going to happen. He's going to have 10 snaps. They'll probably have 5 or so touches, but they're not going to give him any sort of volume. Hunt's going to get the goal line work. This game, I think, is likely to be – I don't think it's likely to be a shootout. I honestly think that the Chiefs kind of dominate this game, and they, in the second half, are just running the ball with Hunt, and if he scores in their red zone opportunities, it can be a great value. So give me some Kareem Hunt above the field I'll be somewhere around 5 to 10% on him, and I think I'll be way above the field. Other guys to mention that to mix in, Kamani Vidal, he's just getting all the work in a decent matchup. And then Jones against the Bears. Yeah, like I'll probably have 10 or so Aaron Jones lineups. Early in the week, I was really on him, but the more I dug into it, I just found better value. I feel like I like Marks better in that range a lot better than Jones. This range, 5,800, like Jones, Swift, Brown, Etienne, and Hunt, those are guys that I could see being usable for a Milly Maker because really they only need to get to 20-ish to pay off their price and be usable. And I think that they're all capable of that. So I want to mix those guys in, but I don't want to take big stands on it. I am fading some pretty big names this week with Kyron Williams. I just think that the Blake Corum split is more real than people want to give into. And I think Seattle's defense is phenomenal. So I think they're going to struggle. I think they're going to struggle for Kyron to hit his ceiling. Like I think that game will be a really good game. It'll be a playoff type atmosphere. But I think if anybody comes out of that game at their price point that's usable, it'll be Puka. But even that I think is pretty low likelihood. Henry against the Browns, that run defense, I don't see it. Quinshawn, this could be a miss for sure, but I just liked White and Dowdle a lot more in that range. So that's why I'm not playing him. RJ Harvey is one that people will mention. I just don't see it for the Broncos. I just think the Broncos are not good. They haven't played anybody with a solid defense and had success against them. And I think with Dobbins out, that Harvey is going to actually struggle in between the tackles. So that is my thought process there. Let's move on to wide receiver. Wide receiver is tough this week. Wide receiver is tough every week. Wide receiver is the hardest position to narrow down. It's the hardest one to predict for sure. But to me, of the pay up options, JSN and Jamar Chase are the most likely in my mind to hit that 40-point ceiling. I think in this playoff atmosphere that JSN is going to eat. Like he just seems like he is the dude. He's been a badass all year. As long as they can hold off Verse a little bit and give Darnold some time, I can see JSN having a 40-point game for sure. Obviously, we've seen Chase do it. We saw Chase do it in this exact matchup previously. So in order to do this, like to get to these guys, like with Chase, I like to pretty much bring Flacco along every time. JSN I'll mix in a little bit without Darnold, but we're going to have to find some pump plays, especially because I think at tight end, like McBride is far and away the best play. If he was a wide receiver at 6,300, like I would rather play him than Flowers. I think he's pretty equivalent to Higgins, definitely better than Addison, better than Nico at that price, or honestly even better than Egbuka. So I want to make McBride a priority. I'm going to try to be around 50% McBride. So McBride plus JSN plus trying to do a 3 running back build when possible is very tough to build. So we need some solid pump plays. But I really like JSN. I try to mix him in as much as I can at this price point. Jefferson, this looks like a good bounce back game for me. We talked about McCarthy. We'll build in some McCarthy, but Jefferson's a guy I want to play solo. At 7,500, he's much easier to play without his quarterback. And against this Bears defense that gives up a ton of big plays in the passing game. And you have McCarthy, who doesn't seem afraid of just chucking it. Probably should avoid that more than he has so far. But I think that could work in Jefferson's favor in this game, give him some opportunities. There's been a lot said about him not hustling and trying to make tackles after the interception and stuff last week. I think he was frustrated in the moment, but I think he's going to come out and remind everybody that he's one of, if not the best receiver in the league this week. And a 7,500 at a $1,400 discount to JSN and a $1,000 discount to Chase. I want to be involved in that. Egbuka is going to be primarily overlooked this week, and it's like he's Baker's go-to guy, so why would I not want to go there? And Buffalo's defense is not good. Like, they just don't grade well at any position. So I'm not fearful of their defense at all. We have the hamstring games. Like this where he was playing like through the hamstring injury. Got the bye, feeling healthier now, puts up 26 last week. Before that, 24, 23, and another 23. Look at these targets. He's getting 13 targets at 7,200. What? Yeah, why are we not more interested in Ibuka? We're going to try to mix him in as much as possible. Nico in a good matchup against Tennessee. Let's look at Nico here. Against Tennessee, the first time he didn't do much, but with Davis Mills in there, what did Davis Mills do? He's not an idiot. I'm getting one shot. I'm going to throw it to the best player on the team as much as possible. I think that's a good plan. I think that if they struggle at all and get in any sort of negative game script, that really could create an awesome ceiling for Collins. But even in a neutral game script or a positive game script, I think Collins could be a big part of how they get there. So I'm interested in the pieces in the Texans. I would do like a Marks and Nico lineup, we'll go running back and the pass catcher. But I don't necessarily think that Houston's going to score like 35 or anything along those lines, but I could see them scoring 3 touchdowns and 2 of those being to Nico's definitely in range, 2 of them being a Marks is definitely in range, and then the other piece of that is Dalton Schultz. So those are the main guys, and I also like Higgins in this matchup. We'll get down to that here in a bit and our pump plays, but I think a piece out of that Houston offense this week makes sense. So we talked about Lamar. Zay Flowers, I've been going back and forth between either just having to be a mix-in play or being a core play for me. But with Lamar back and healthy, like he is their go-to guy. He just lacks touchdown upside. He's only scored 1 TD this whole year. But he gets at 6,400. If he gets to 20, which he could do he could do 8 catches for 100 yards, and that gets him around that 25 mark. That would pay off even without the touchdown. And obviously, if he gets the touchdown, then he's very valuable. So I want to, of my core plays in here, he's the one that I'm probably like most iffy on, but I can see it. I can definitely see it. So I'll probably be somewhere around like 10%-ish on Flowers. Really love Higgins. Huge discount to Chase and similar upside. So I'll take the cheaper option and mix that in across all my lineups. He'll be one of my highest rostered guys for sure. Same thing we talked about with Jefferson, but Addison has a ton of upside against this really bad Bears defense. He's had 40-point games in the past. Again, McCarthy's willing to throw the ball up. I can see one of these guys having a big game, and in some scenarios, both of them having a big game. So I like the cheaper option of Addison at 5,500. Burned us last week, but we'll go back to him again this week. For the 49ers, I would lean Jennings is the more likely one, but I want to definitely mix in Pearsall. Nobody will be playing him coming off of the injury, but he was really solid early in the year. And this Arizona defense is not something that I am worried about by any means. And with Purdy being back, I think they're going to have a lot of success through the passing game. So give me all their pass catchers, especially when they're all around 5K. I think that game has a high likelihood of going off. Then down here we got Worthy at 4,900. You'll notice that I don't have Rice in here as my core plays, but I do have Worthy. That's primarily price-based. I think Rice is more likely to score more points than Worthy. But when Worthy hits, he's going to hit in like a 25-plus point game scenario. Like when Worthy hits, I think he probably has like a 50 or 60-yard touchdown. And then he likely hits that 100-yard bonus that gets us in that 25-point range. And I think everything I'm seeing in that specific matchup is just screaming to me that they're going to drop some plays for Worthy. They're going to try to use that focus on Rice to their advantage and drop some shot plays to Worthy. So we're banking on those hitting, and I think there's a high likelihood of that occurring this week. It would be different if Surtain was playing, but Surtain's not playing. So I really believe in the Chiefs coming out and actually dominating that game. And then with Marvin Harrison out, Michael Wilson's the last man standing. He's a really solid punt play. I will play him with McBride because really he just needs to if he gets 6 for 60, he doesn't even need a touchdown or 5 for 70 or whatever it may be, something in that range. If he gets around 12 points, we can deal with that at 3,800, and that opens up other stuff for us. And he does, with the amount of targets he's going to get against this really bad defense, he easily could score a touchdown. So Wilson's a really good punt play. Higgins is another good punt play, one of my favorite ones this week. Let's go over here and look at his game log. 7 targets last week with Mills in there. Higgins have been running a lot of scout team this year, earlier in the year, so I think him and Mills have a little bit of rapport, which is something to keep an eye on. Obviously, that game streak was a little different as they were down 29-10 in that game, so they were having to throw the ball. I don't think we quite get that complexion of a game this week. It's possible, but unlikely. But if they, he's just going to be on the field more. Like when I'm looking at the snap share, his snap share has been increasing week in and week out. He is a good player. He passes the eye test, and when he's getting opportunity, he's paying them off. So at 3,500, like he scored 15 last week. If he scores 15 this week at 3,500, that is a great play for us. So I think he's capable of doing that. And then our last one down here is D-Hop. And the big thing is early in the season, scored a couple touchdowns, but he's the only other receiver that's been running routes against this Browns defense. I think that Lamar will be going to him and Zay at 3,400. If he scores a touchdown, which I think is very likely this week, he pays off his price at 3,400. So I'm going to be really heavy on Hopkins. Nobody in the field is going to have that. I might be crazy, but this feels like it opens up a ton for this slate. So I'll be somewhere around 20% on Hopkins, because if that hits, which I think there's a really good chance of this week, it opens up so much opportunity in our lineups. Then we can build 3 running back builds with McBride, and then in some cases, we can even still pay up in this range. We can definitely get to like Jefferson or a Nico, somewhere in that range for sure. If I have Puka in my mix-in plays, I'll primarily just play him with Stafford. I just don't, like, I think he could have a really solid game, but when I'm making my player pool, I'm looking at guys in the similar range and trying to narrow down that range. And when I do that, when I'm looking at 8,900 and 8,500 for JSN and Jamar Chase, they just seem like the much more likely to score 40 points this week. All that being said, when you're in a playoff environment like this game is going to be, I think that they're going to rely heavily on their studs, and Puka's going to have a good game. Like, he's probably going to score 20-some points. But at this price, he needs to score 40. He's done that once this year, but everything else, 25, 26, like, that doesn't do it for me. And they're running so much of this 3 tight end stuff. He's actually coming off the field a decent amount for that. And I think they'll adjust if they need to. Obviously, if they need Puka on the field, they'll make that happen. But I think his upside is getting limited. And I don't want a 25-point game from Nacua at 8,700, which I think is his likely outcome. I think he ends up around 25, has a really good NFL game, keeps him in the game. But JSN, I just think has a much higher likelihood of hitting 40 points because he is like their dude and everything revolves around him. Where Nacua, it's not necessarily all revolving around him. They've been changing it up with this 3 tight end set that they've been running a lot of. And obviously you got Devontae, who's taking a lot of the red zone stuff away, where JSN's getting a lot more work in the red zone. And then same thing for Chase, that he has touchdown equity upside that Nacua doesn't have. So because of that's why I'm lower on Nacua. He could definitely burn me, but to me, JSN and Chase are the better options. We talked through Rice a little bit. London is one that I'm scared of fading. Obviously, he is like their go-to guy, and he's been putting up really solid scores. But he's been sick this whole week, which I don't like. That doesn't really scare me off. He's been putting up big games, 35, 40, 27. I'm scared to fade him. I'm not going to fade him completely. I'll probably end up around like 10%-ish. Maybe a little less, probably closer to 5, actually. Like, I want to be in love with this play, and I was earlier in the week, but the more I dug into it, it was just telling me that in that range, Jefferson and Egbuka are much better plays. They're more likely to hit their ceiling this week, more likely to win me a Milly Maker. Same thing with Ladd. Like, I think he could have a decent week, but the ball gets spread around so much there, it's hard to see like a ceiling game for him. Nico definitely has more ceiling game potential there. Odunze, you could also see it happening, but the thing about Odunze is I'm concerned about the Bears in this matchup. They've been playing well against bad teams, and they are a better team, but I don't think they're quite there yet. And against a Brian Flores defense, I have a feeling that Caleb Williams is going to struggle this week. So I don't want to have too much Odunze because of that. Wandell is the only piece available, basically, for the Giants with Jameis Winston, but they're playing the Packers. This matchup is not good for them. I think there's a decent chance that they turn the ball over a good amount. There's not a lot of touchdown equity here. He's going to be pretty popular. Addison, to me, has a much more direct path to getting to 40 points. I want to pursue that rather than Wandell getting me 15 at 5,500. Parker Washington I was more interested in, but it looks like there's a good chance he plays. If he doesn't play, I'd be a little bit more interested in Washington. I like Jennings more than Washington and that range, though. And I actually even Dobbs more than Washington in that range. So he's a decent play. Wanted to mention him, but not in love with him. Dobbs seems to be like the last man standing in Green Bay. Him and Christian Watson are definitely guys that you can mix in. But I really believe that the Packers are just going to run the football. So earlier in the week, I was like, oh, wow, these guys are good value. And they very well could be. But my gut just tells me that Josh Jacobs in a must-win where they need to get back on track, and LaFleur is feeling his seat warm up a little bit. To me, that they're going to go to the tried and true. They're going to give the ball to Jacobs, and they're just going to run the ball down the Giants' throat, which has been pretty easy for teams to do this year. So because of that, I'm out on the Packers receivers. And the other thing about Watson, I was more intrigued in Watson. I was mixing him in more when I thought that Golden was going to be out, but it looks like Golden's going to play. So that makes Watson less interesting to me. QJ's intriguing. Shaheed's intriguing. Tez is intriguing. But I like Worthy the most out of that range. And I'll build, like, all these guys will be built into my stacks when I play their quarterback. So it's not like I won't be getting exposure to them. It's just I don't really want to I don't want to waste, I shouldn't say waste lineups, but these are the guys that I feel like give a higher likelihood of wasting lineups if I play more of them. These guys, if I can get 4 or 5 of these guys in the top 10, then I'll have a really good week. And I think that this is where I see the top 10 guys coming from, like the most likely guys at each level of pricing. Obviously, receivers hard to predict. Like these guys, I could be wrong on a lot of these guys. There's probably going to be 3 or 4 of these guys that should have been over here. But when we're doing these, when we're narrowing down our player pool, we just have to take all the information that we have and make the best decision we can in each price range. And I feel confident in our decision-making process this week on why we got to these guys over these guys. But in the video, I wanted to go through my thought process on these guys for you all to consider. Like Calvin Austin, actually mentioned how I'm not playing DK in what seems to be a juicy matchup against the Bengals, but I really think that passing game is just going to go through the tight ends. Calvin Austin didn't play in the first game, if I remember correctly, against the Bengals. Let me find him real quick to verify that, make sure I'm not leading you astray on that. Yeah, he did not play when they played the Bengals the first time. So he could be sneaky in there for sure. But yeah, I just think that Wilson is the better play in that range because you know that he's going to get at least some volume in a good matchup too. Austin could hit for sure, but I like Wilson better in that range. Other names to mention, punt plays, Burden, Yosevas, Naylor, Dortch. Naylor did it last week in another good matchup this week, but he made some good plays. I just don't think there's going to be like consistency with Naylor there. I think we need to go back to the studs this week in Addison and Jefferson out of that offense. Fading a lot of receivers this week. Some names like I'm fading Shakir. I don't know where Allen's going to go with the ball. Shakir is probably the most likely, but his upside is just limited. Yeah, he can get 25, but over in this other range, like these guys, I feel like these guys, Addison in particular, can put up a 40 spot. I don't think Shakir can ever really do that. Yeah, and I lack faith in this Bills offense, especially without Kincaid. So I'm out there. I like McMillan as a player. I just don't trust Bryce Young, and I think that they're going to run the ball. Harrison's obviously out. Devontae is a little banged up, and at his price, like I can't justify playing Devontae over Justin Jefferson or Mecca Igbuka. I just can't get there. So having to make some tough decisions this week. Wide receiver was really the hardest one to filter through. I feel confident about our core plays, but this is just it's a tough slate to nail down at receiver. I'll admit that for sure. I think that we've made the best decisions possible with this group. But if we have a bad week, it likely, I think, is coming from this range. All right, let's get to tight end. I have no doubts about Trey McBride at tight end. I'm going to try to get to 5% or 50% of him. Like, he's the dude with Brissett. He scores touchdowns, too. Let's look at this game log since he's been playing with Brissett. Like, it is nice. 30 spot last week, 17 against Dallas, 30 against Green Bay, 21 against Indianapolis. And this week with Marvin Harrison going out, like that target number is going to be 13 or higher. I would almost guarantee you that it's going to be there. And I just don't see anybody on San Francisco's side that can stop them. I don't see a scheme in which they can stop him either. I think there's going to be a ton of points in that game. I really like the San Francisco and Arizona to be the highest scoring game of the week. And McBride is just like the obvious duh play coming out of it. So I'm not going to overthink it. Like, he's the dude. I'm going to have 50% McBride somewhere in that range. If I'm not playing McBride, or if I'm going double tight end, which is a solid way to build, I like going 3 running back as much as possible. But if I'm going to mix in like a JSN or a Chase, guys like that, and have McBride, it makes it really hard to get to 3 running backs. In those builds, I'll have some 2 tight end. I like McBride and Kittle in the same lineup, especially when I'm playing Purdy. I've mixed that in a few times. I like Kate Otten to have a lot of touches this week. Schultz has been really solid as of late, been getting a lot of work. He's off the injury report now too. Yeah, 18, 13, 4, 18, but 11 targets, 8 targets. I think this was the game he came out hurt in, if I remember right. And then, yeah, I had 10 the week before that. So he's getting a lot of targets. He's looked pretty solid. I expect him to be around that similar target number again at 3,900. Another great punt play. I honestly like him more than Michael Wilson at that price. So if like I'm having to punt in the flex, I would rather punt with Schultz than I would with Wilson there. And then go back over here. Freiermuth, like it's hard to narrow down these tight ends for Pittsburgh, but last time it was Freiermuth putting up a 31 spot. And my thought process is like the Bengals are worse. Like they don't have Hendrickson. He's not playing this week. So it's what they have nothing. What do they have now that they didn't have when they played the last time? The answer is nothing. Sure, it could be Jonnu. Sure, it could be Darnell Washington. But I just don't see why Freiermuth can't have a repeat game. It's probably not 31, but him putting up a 20 spot, I would not be surprised by that. Like him getting in the end zone one time and having 60, 70 yards definitely pays off his price. I like him as a punt play too if I'm going double tight end, especially when I'm building those like JSN and Chase lineups. Him ending up in the flex and getting McBride in there. I like that a lot this week. Other guys to mention at tight end: Kelsey, Gaston, Johnson, Pitts, Loveland, Andrews, Knox, Likely, and Smith. Like you can make a case, you can squint, and you can see how these guys hit a 20 spot. But really, to me, like it's McBride, and then these guys, it would make sense for all these guys to be around 20. And then these guys, it seems much more unlikely to me. It could happen. You can squint and see it. But tight end, I feel really confident about this week that it's these 5 guys are far and above the best plays this week. Let's move over to the defense. Defense, there's 3 great plays at the top. It's going to be hard to get to 3,800 Ravens, 3,700 Texans, or 3,600 Packers. But anytime I can, I will. So what I'm basically doing with my defenses this week is I'm building my lineup, and then whatever I have left is where I'm inserting that defense. I'm not taking a big stand on anybody. Like, the Packers are my favorite defense. If you're like, I needed to pick one, I would say the Packers. Jameis Winston's really good at throwing touchdowns to both teams. So I like the chances of the Packers having a big week against Jameis Winston. But getting to 3,600 is really tough. I can see the Steelers getting some turnovers against Joe Flacco and that really bad offensive line of the Bengals. I can also see them scoring defensive touchdowns and the Bengals still having a big week. So I'm not opposed to playing the Steelers against the Bengals because the Bengals are really good in chase mode. And if the Steelers get out to a lead because of a defensive score, that still sets up well for the Bengals pass catchers and even Flacco to have a big game. Not afraid of that. They've been playing better as of late. They've made some adjustments since the last time they played the Bengals by putting Ramsey in at safety rather than corner. So we'll see if that impacts it at all. But I could see them getting a defensive touchdown. So because of that, I want to mix them in. The Chiefs are another one of my favorites. I do not believe in this Broncos team. The Broncos have a good offensive line, but I don't believe in Sean Payton as a play caller. I don't believe in Bo Nix. I think he plays with a lot of confidence and is capable of 4-quarter comebacks and things along those lines. Like, he seems unfazed by making mistakes throughout the game, which obviously is a positive. Like, you want a quarterback to have a short memory, but he's not good. Like, he just makes a lot of bad choices week in and week out. I could see the Chiefs getting a good chunk of turnovers and plenty of sacks, and I don't think that they're going to be able to run the ball nearly as well without J.K. Dobbins. So I like the Chiefs a lot there. I like playing defenses against the Jaguars week in and week out, and that's who the Chargers play. So we're going to go there again this week. The Bucks against the Bills. The Bucks are a pretty solid defense, and they've scored some solid fantasy points throughout the year. Nobody's going to really be playing them because they're fearful of the Bills, but I'm not nearly as fearful of the Bills as other people are. At 26 in a week, 11, 8 would be fine, 14, all solid. So I can see it. And then we got the Browns and the Titans. The thing, normally I don't like, the Titans are obviously a bad defense, but they're playing Davis Mills and the Houston Texans. Turnover or a defensive touchdown is definitely in play at 2,300. It opens up a lot of options too. So I'm not opposed to playing them this week. Browns are one of the best defenses in the league, but they're playing the healthy Ravens now. So I don't love them as much as I normally would, but I will definitely mix them in when I am in that range for sure. I probably want to have more Browns than I want to have Bucks, but so yeah, I'll mess around sometimes with leaving $100 out there to get to the Browns rather than the Bucks. I probably want them to be pretty even though. As much as possible, I want to try to get in this range, though. Chargers and up. It's just hard to get to. My friends, let's go ahead and build a lineup. We'll start with running back here. I'll go with one of my core stacks this week. We'll go with Dowdle, Jacobs, and then we will go 3 running back. We could go Warren. We could go Marks, or we could go Demercado. Let's go Demercado here for my 3 running back play. Then we're gonna go ahead and bring in McBride. All right, so we can't really pay up at. If we went JSN, yeah, we can't do that. So, like, the most expensive we could go out receiver here would be Jefferson. That would still be tough. But who could we go with? If we make this a Jacoby lineup, let's go ahead and just do that. Do a Jacoby lineup. Let's go ahead and we'll get At wide receiver, we'll get Worthy in there at 4,900. It's 3,650. Okay, so if we put in the Packers, which is like my favorite defense, we could go down and we could get some D-Hop, which is a little crazy, but kind of like it. Or we could this or that with the Titans. And who does that open up at 5K? Dobbs is in consideration. Shaheed. Really, I would want to get to Jennings, though, so it doesn't quite open that up. Like, really, in this range, like the next go-to guy that I have in my core plays is Michael Wilson, which could somewhat work in a Brissett lineup for sure. But we're just going to go McBride, gets all the volume in this one. So we'll go with a Jameis Winston throwing 3 touchdowns that just happened all to be to the Packers. And then we will go down and we will get our sneakiest of sneaky pump plays. D-Hop with Rashad Bateman out this week, gets in the end zone and pays off his price. So we got Jacoby Brissett in a 3 running back build with Dowdle, Jacobs, and Demercado. Brissett stacked with Demercado and McBride. Love Brissett at this price. If he puts up a 25 spot, he is definitely capable of taking down the Milly Maker for us. And we got Jefferson having a bounce back game. We know he's capable of putting up 40. He hasn't done it yet this year. To me, that means he's due. Same thing with Worthy. This is the week against the Denver secondary that's banged up. There is our $1 million lineup right there, my friends. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend. Good luck in week 11. Shoot me an email at millymakermaniac@gmail.com if you're interested in getting the spreadsheets, and comment with your slate breaker. Let me know where I got it right. Let me know where I got it wrong. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Good luck in week 11, and we will see you on Monday, $1 million richer. All right, my friends, have a great weekend. Good luck.